So the question is, does it live up to all the hype? And I'd say, yeah, it's definitely the most cinematic of the original six. And each one has placed more focus on story and characters while keeping a lot of the core gameplay the same. And this one definitely places a lot of emphasis on the characters. Just the sheer amount of playable characters. And I kind of laughed about it, but in a way, it's kind of similar to 5, having all those different job classes that you could switch between. Only here it's characters, and their different abilities are spread out in that way instead. And that's pretty good for like world building and characterization. I know 5 I liked that I could switch job class on the fly whenever I wanted, and I wouldn't have to worry about restoring HP and MP when I did that. I could just switch classes, level it up, and have access to everything they needed. 6 makes you switch characters, which you can only do on the airship or in certain places, which is kind of an issue, not in a way like in terms of accessibility. Like obviously it makes sense, and the story made a lot of effort to make sure that certain characters were somewhere else or stay behind, and that I know that carries over into 7 as well. And some of the other games they kind of go that way with it. I would have quite liked to be able to switch them on the fly. It would have saved me a little bit of time in certain areas, but I think it was pretty good. I quite liked most of the characters. Some of them were a bit like Mog, didn't really care for. Gao especially, just kind of a drain on my resources. But it didn't help that selecting one of his rage moves, it doesn't tell you what the move does, which is just bizarre to me. Like there's even a window that pops up when you select it, but it's empty. And I'm like, well, every other spell or item, it tells you what it does when you select it, and that would have been really useful to see. And I know I didn't make the most out of him because I didn't sort of learn all his moves. That's something I'll do later, but he just, it was weird having, so he learns moves from enemies, but Strago also does it with his blue magic. So you've got two characters who are kind of doing that, and that's the main thing they do. And then you've also got the lore moves as well. So there's a lot of like learning stuff from from enemies and stuff. They kind of spread that blue magic out in a way to those three characters, which is fine, but it did limit things a bit because it's like, well, why not just consolidate it into the blue magic, and then you could have had that Yeti fill Gao's role. He could have, had some more, had a bit more prominence in the plot that way, and still been optional maybe. And then also the same with Gogo, could have filled, the other role. You've already got all these characters, so spreading out that gimmick was just, it's more annoying than anything else. And luckily you can just kind of ignore it, which is what I have done here. But obviously I want to get all the achievements, so I'm going to have to go back and get all that stuff. Everything else I really liked. Like I might have to look it up and see what that trance mode actually does, because I didn't really use it. I tried using it in the end there to see if it would make Terra's magic more powerful, and potentially that's what that's for. I'm not really sure what it does. It seems to just waste a turn. I'm not. It must power up in some way, but I didn't really need to use it, so it's kind of. I don't think the game even told me what it did, but it may have done. I may have just not paid attention. I liked the Magicite gimmick, which is, obviously I'm coming into this after playing 7 and 8 and 9, but it reminds me of what happens in those games with like GFs and stuff, teaching you different magics and things like that, which is great. And I liked being able to swap between them and level them up. So that's kind of like the job class system from 5, retranslated into a new gimmick. It comes in a bit late in the game, maybe. Would have been nice to see that introduced gradually, similar to the jobs you get in the other games. So like every time you rescue a crystal, which by the way I've only just realised the crystals aren't in this game. Every time you sort of get to a crystal, you get 3 or 4 new jobs. So and that's spread all throughout the game. So it might have been nice to have that happen here. As ever, I didn't really see a need to summon creatures. I really do. But that's just the way I play. I don't really like to expend my MP because I may need it. Like I might need it for healing or status stuff and everything. So I don't like to waste it unless I have to. And when I know there's like a save point or something coming up to use a tent, that's fine. But even with a guide, like I don't always know when that's happening. Kefka is definitely the star of the show here. Like I say, I was a little disappointed. He kind of disappears in that, what I'm going to generously call the third act. Like that, once the world turns to ruin, he's not really a physical presence anymore. And he was such a strong presence in the start of the game. It is a bit of a shame he's not there somehow. Like it might have been nice. Got to destroy those dragons. Maybe if he'd appeared before a couple of them and was doing something, or if you cut to him while he's doing something, or yeah, it's just because they were sort of building him up as like an omnipresent threat, which is fine, but as it turned out, he wasn't really. He was absorbing magic, and I liked that he was like shooting his power at the world there to wreck it. Might have been good to see that happen a few times throughout the story. Maybe some of these towns and stuff could have been hit in a cutscene as you're going in. Like, oh, Kefka has attacked this town, and this has happened now because of that. Like some of the towns, like Nash, had enemies in it, so some kind of a cutscene showing him doing that might have been good. But otherwise, he's always been such an enigma to me. Such a bizarre choice for a villain, and he goes from, as ever with Final Fantasy villains. Others have done, like X-Dev did it before him, and Sephiroth obviously took it to the next level. But he just going from like Vizier, Mage, to poisoning all the water, killing all those people, and then becoming literally a god. Just bonkers stuff for a for a game that starts off so not like grounded, but starts off one way. Just the escalation is incredible there, but it does feel like it lost some of that momentum because he just disappeared, and I would have liked to see him physically in the game doing something. It felt like he'd kind of run out of steam. Like a lot of games, especially RPGs, have that thing where there's a problem that's happening and you need to go and solve it, but that's the plot. But mechanically, you can go off and do whatever you like. Like Seven's a great example. Right at the end, you have meteors in the sky. You have to go to the North Cave, or whatever the Northern Cavern, whatever it's called. You have to go there to confront Sephiroth and save the world, but you could just fly off and do whatever. You can go to Gold Saucer, you can do all these other things. The world's at stake, but the plot is paused for that to happen. And that seems to have happened here, where it's like, all these characters were lost for a year, and then you can tell it's taking real world in-game time for them to reunite and everything, and yet Kefka is still building that power that whole time. So it might have been good to see something happen with that, just to kind of keep him in mind. But yeah, Terra, I really liked Terra. She had a lot of humanity. All the characters had a lot to them. Like it's a very dark and bleak game at times, with so much death and loss, which I kind of knew was happening, but it was still quite emotional to see in a lot of ways. And just graphically, I mean, the Pixel Remaster was obviously like giving it a nice new coat of paint, but this is like the pinnacle of this style for Final Fantasy games, to the point where, again, I would love it if they did 7 in a demake style. I'm glad they're doing this 2.5D HD new game that's coming out, because this is the style of Final Fantasy I really like, because it's quite casual to play, especially with this version where you kind of do your setup and just press X and the game plays itself to a degree. And like for someone like me, where like I don't have that much time, I can just kind of play it and do certain things, set certain level up goals, and just go with it and not have to worry too much about moving and doing much more than attacking. And I would say with 6, I found 5 was the first time in these original 6 where I felt challenged. The other games, the previous games, I didn't really hit a challenge until the final boss or certain super bosses. But even then, it was a simple matter of just getting past, just fighting a bit harder. I think I had to reload a couple of times on maybe Cloud of Darkness. I think it was one of them. I think it was Final Fantasy IV. I had to take a second shot at that, and I definitely did with Chaos in the first game. But with 5, there was quite a few times where I kept hitting walls. There was that super boss tortoise thing in the Gill Cave. That was a pain in the ass, even with a correct setup. But it seems like then there was the Mime Go-Go, where you had to just stand still. There was lots of different strategies you had to do, where even with all these extra quality of life features, it was still a bit tough. And that was a good challenge. It was doable, but it was challenging in just the right way. 6, I found, was not quite as challenging in that way. It was very few and far between where I would have those moments where I'd need a specific setup. I think the challenge comes more in the size of the world and the different things you have to do. Most enemies weren't too difficult to track down and find and beat. There isn't really any like super boss challenge. Like Death Gaze turned out to be a cakewalk in the end, but again, that could come down to the fact that I was nicely overpowered. I'd done a lot of leveling up, and I have like the quality of life features as well to help out with that. So I think on the original hardware it may have been slightly more challenging. I think you can kind of see that. And then yeah, that was a bit, I don't know. I was glad it wasn't too challenging. I didn't want to be bashing my head against the wall, but it definitely puts much more emphasis on puzzles. That was it. Yeah, like splitting the party up, and then that maze puzzle in the Moogle cave or whatever. That was annoying, and like the puzzle element seems more there here than in the previous games, where it was usually just a case of opening a door, opening a chest, and things like that. Whereas here, there's a definite, like, you can't even access some areas without interacting with lots of different characters and doing certain things. So I think that definitely helps with the scope of the game. So I was surprised. I said when I got to 5, like each one has gotten better. It's basically the same game, but they've expanded on it and expanded on the mechanics in the world. And a lot of the gameplay, if you've played the first Final Fantasy and then you jump to 6, you can pretty much pick it up and work it out straight away. Like, I haven't had to sit down and work out all new ways of playing in these 6 games. Even 2, I just played that exactly the same as I played any other Final Fantasy game, and then I had to deviate a bit to properly level certain things up, but that wasn't really essentially any different to leveling up Magicite or leveling up the jobs. It was essentially that, except it was in the combat. So it had such a huge... I was really worried about playing to it. It had such a huge reputation in my head of like, oh, this one's the worst one. It's so difficult. So difficult, or it's so like different. And it turned out to really not be that much different. I was really surprised, and I flew through that game without any real issues. It was fine. And then 3 adjusted back to the proper gameplay style, for lack of a better word, but it still had those mechanics in it. They were just implemented better, and in a way you could say that, like, like I say, not much has changed in the 6 games technically, like mechanically rather, like in terms of gameplay. It's just been tweaked and expanded, and it's the story and the world that's gotten bigger, and I think that really sets each one apart. So it's, and especially 6, it really stood out with the steampunk setting, this kind of fantasy and magic system that's going on. Like I say, the crystals weren't involved this time. It wasn't really about saving princesses or anything like that. Um, and not really about restoring the natural balance of the world in the same way. It was a different way with, like, the crystals here. You could say that's what the magicite is, but that's not the same as like the wind crystal and the fire crystal and stuff. It's a bit different. And then I can see in this just so many things that we used in other games as well. Like I say, Sephiroth is the next evolution of Kefka. Both their final forms are very similar. This idea of like monsters coming in from another world, that came in 8 with they came from the moon instead of another world, and a lot of this similar things pop up in 9 as well. That's where I have my comparisons end, because I've already played up to 9 at this point. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm really glad I finally